This episode is sponsored by Secure, the gun storage system. Have you ever wondered the best way to store your guns, ammo, and actually all your valuables? There is a fine line between safety and accessibility. There's also something to be said about being able to customize your safe for your needs. If you're storing long guns, handguns, ammo, or just need a wall to hang your equipment on, Secure has your back. They have cabinets, rooms, and everything in between. Secure safes are simple, strong, straightforward, and, by the way, they don't keep your combination codes. Secure it. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Silencer Central. Silencer Central, thank you for supporting us. If you would like to support Silencer Central, if you have any interest in a silencer, which I encourage because it is a game changer in the field, check out silencercentral.com. They will walk you through the paperwork online, as well as they can ship that silencer directly to your doorstep. So check them out and tell them Ike sent you. Well, Tim, thanks for coming. We're at the Hunt Expo here in Salt Lake. First day, first morning, and lots to see. I know you guys got some new products. You're with Leupold. And what do you do with Leupold, or do we just not know?
No, it's secret.
You're the guy in the lab?
Yeah, that might be better. Keep me more hidden. I lead the product development and the marketing team.
Okay.
So new products, and how do we make them, and then how do we talk about them?
That's
afterwards.
cool.
All the fun stuff. I love it.
And you guys got some new stuff coming out. Obviously, we'll talk about the new scope, the rangefinder, but let's talk a little bit about Tim and your background, where you grew up, where you went to school, that's interesting because we share that.
Yeah.
Unbeknownst to either one of us. But you live in Oregon right now. And,
I do. Yep.
Where did you grow up?
So I grew up. My dad was in the Navy, and so I grew up I started on the East Coast, but I don't remember any of that. We moved before I was two years old. So
Okay.
Most of what I remember was in Washington State, small Navy town up in the Puget Sound area.
Okay.
And so grew up there. My dad's family was from Wyoming, and
Okay.
that was just enough different, and it kind of just called to me every time we'd go out there.
It's a beautiful place, I think.
I love it, man. It is beautiful, and compared to Western Washington, a ton of differences.
Yeah.
Right. And so I would go out on the summers, work for we have family out there still, and taxidermy. So I'm working in a taxidermy shop. And
Where in Wyoming?
in Glen Rock.
Oh, wow. Okay. Small
Yeah.
town.
Small town.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So kind
Center
of
of
near
the state.
Casper and Douglas there. And I would go spend summers out there and just got the bug. I was like, wait a minute, people can live here. This is how this can work in other places.
And then Ledoux says, some people do.
Yeah. As soon as I was old enough, I already knew it was set in my head. So I knew which college I wanted to go to. I knew what I wanted to do early on, and it was to get back out there. And so that's ultimately what happened. Moved out there, went to college, and fell in with an outfitter.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, University of Wyoming, we were actually there at the same time. We didn't know each other.
No.
I was married back then. Still am, to my first wife. But, so University of Wyoming, what did you study?
I was an education major.
Okay.
Elementary education is where we started.
This
This is a winding road with me.
I could tell.
I was a little naive, we'll call it. I didn't realize that it would be political
Oh, yeah.
to be a teacher.
Yeah.
I figured
Most
that out
of
pretty
it.
quick. Yeah.
No, thank
Figured
you.
that
So
out.
did you graduate with an education degree?
I did. Yeah, I saw it through, got it done, got the piece of paper, and actually learned a ton of good things that really helped me, as I started working in the industry or guiding hunters or other things, the ability to explain something and then the ability to take kind of the feedback that you're
Yeah.
going to get. In a lot of cases, not talking down to anyone, is like teaching fifth graders.
Yeah, we all are. I say this all the time. My whole crew is like third graders.
I'm not sure
Including
I've progressed
myself.
past that. And so it's perfect level for me. No, it really did transfer. A lot of it, it applied, and just learning how people learn has served me fairly well.
So you worked for the outfitter as a guide
I did.
in Glen Rock? Or?
Yeah, it kind of depended on the season. So my cousin was an outfitter, and we would do deer, elk, antelope hunts out of the Glen Rock area. Some of the mountain lion stuff you're following, moving snow, chasing the snow around. We did prairie dog shooting in the summers, which was a blast. It's another way to
literally
stay out there and just be in the field, be out in nature, all that.
And it's
that
a
whole
beautiful
deal.
time of year. It's in the
Oh, it's
spring. The grass is green. It's warm finally after winter. It's a
Yep.
beautiful time to be out there.
Yeah, and it's another, in some cases 90 days in the field, which I
Right.
loved. That was the best part.
So how did you transition from being a guide to running the product development? I mean, you're like number 2 at Leupold. How did that happen?
That was part of this community that we're in, right? When I'm out there guiding the, if you can call it guiding, prairie dog hunters, but deer, elk, antelope, that's a little closer.
Driving them around.
The crew from Leupold, the sales and marketing team, came and hunted with us every year, and so I got a chance to meet everybody there, and I could see it, I could feel it, that when that team showed up, they were one team, one fight. They worked hard. You could see them working in the evenings, but they played hard, and it was something bigger, you know, and you could feel that. Everybody loved working there. And so about the time I graduated and was trying to look for what my parents would call a real job, they had a position answering phones. So kind of somebody would call in and want a catalog, and we used to just handwrite on an envelope, stick a catalog in it, lick that, mail it, and away you go. Or I need new screws for my mounting systems or whatever, and then it progresses up into more of the technical stuff. How does this part of a scope work? Why am I seeing this result? But yeah, I started out just applying for a job answering phones. And that came together at the end of a guiding season, which does help on the finances.
Yeah.
Because it kind of just shuts off for a while there. And I needed to do something, and that family looked like a place that I could make a home. And
so you literally grew up through Leupold, from answering the phones to running product development.
I did, yeah.
That's a great story. So let me ask you this. Do you have some good advice for guys? Because I get this question a lot. You know, I just want to be in the hunting industry. Do you have some good advice on how to do it successfully? The best way to start it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, what I would probably recommend is it's a pretty welcoming and open community. If someone comes up, we can recognize our own, if you will, right? Yeah. And so if you see someone who is willing to do 2 key things, hustle and follow up, is kind of what I say. If you're willing to hustle and you're willing to follow up on whatever has been asked of you or whatever needs to be done, and you find people that are in this industry, I'd be willing to bet 9 times out of 10 they're gonna get you connected with somebody. It's a small enough but big enough industry that we can recognize that. And it's like, I remember being that guy or that gal in some cases, and I want to help, and I've loved that about this. I've seen people come and enter the industry, and they don't know much about it other than they liked hunting with their dad or their mom, or a neighbor took them, or something, or people that grew up with it. But when they get that inkling, if you stick with it a little bit.
It's really interesting. I didn't know that you started that way, but you're not the only one I've met that's done that. John Snodgrass, same thing. When I first met him, he was answering the phone. He was customer service, and now he's part of your team in development.
Yeah, well, it's also a Wyoming background, so he went to Wyotech.
Yeah, he was down there at the same time as all of us.
All of us, and none of us crossed paths. No,
which probably did. There's only like 3 bars in that town. We were probably in the same bar at some point.
I would imagine that we spent a lot of time together and just didn't know it.
No, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, John was a mechanic, right? So he went through and did the auto mechanic thing, but again, our kind of the passion to do what we like for work as well. You can see that on people,
and that's one of the things that I appreciate about Leupold is they're functional, they're awesome products and functional, but you can tell that the guys at Leupold that are developing this stuff like you guys are using it. Because when there's something I find, I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird. The next version doesn't have it or is fixed because you're using it. You guys hunt a lot. I mean,
we do. It's what we all do in our spare time, if there is spare time.
Yeah.
Yep.
So let's talk about some of the new stuff you guys came out with, the new scope and the rangefinder. What's different about them? What makes them unique? What should guys be paying attention? Because I know there's a ton of technology in that. We had one of our guys, Brandon Mason, on YouTube. If you're interested in this, go check it out. We have a YouTube gear review on this scope, and it goes down to the details of it, which we don't have to do that here. But what makes it unique, and what is it, actually?
Sure.
What do you call it?
Yeah, so this is a Gen 2 version of our VX6-HD. So the 6 just means it's a 6-to-1 zoom ratio. So if it starts on 3 power, instead of going up to 9, it goes up to 18. So it's this particular one is a 3-to-18. We have 4-to-24s, 2-to-12s. But really what's going on with the change here is, again, like you were talking about, when you're out using these things, we're always asking what bothers me about this. I on the product side, look, it's easy to say I love these parts about it, but that doesn't make you better. What we need to hear is, what do you not like? what is irritating, what is not doing something the way that you want it to.
Expectations.
And what we're seeing is really, and what we've identified here, is a couple of key areas. So there's a lot of crossover between long-range shooting and hunting and practicing and NRL hunter and PRS matches and all of that. So what we wanted to go to work on here was doubling down on the adjustment system. So there's a competition grade adjustment system in there that comes, basically harkens from our Mark series of scopes, military government rated scopes. So we want to make sure that every click is perfect and exact and returns to zero, because we're now dialing for every single shot, right? Not everybody does, but I tend to. I get a CDS dial. It matches my environmentals and my caliber, and now I don't need to think about it. If it's a 400-yard shot, I turn it to the 4. I know that bullet's going to hit where I want it to. And that kind of leads me to the second component here was the dials. You need to take those off to put on your CDS dial, take the kind of the factory MOA dial off. Or when you go somewhere new, so I come from sea level in the Portland area, come out and go hunting with you guys, we may be at 8,000 feet. I'm going to, at minimum, need to re-zero.
Okay.
But I also have different environmentals, so I want to put a different dial on there. There were set screws holding those dials on. And if you look at any of the employees, people that use these scopes, I had wrenches in my wallet, one in my truck, one in my backpack, one in my bino harness, just so that I knew if I needed to make a correction, I had that little Allen key with me. Well, that's one of those things that annoys me.
Yeah.
You're out there.
Why am I packing all these around?
Yeah, I've got all of this stuff, and one little screw, if it backs out, now it's loose, and where was I set before? And so we really just wanted to eliminate that. And on these, I don't know if it'll show, but there's just a push button here.
Okay.
So I push that button, lift
Pops
that
out.
lever up, and then it just comes right off.
Oh, wow.
So I can take it off and change it, but I can also just adjust my zero. So if I needed to, when I'm zeroing and sighting in, okay, I need to go, down 3 or 4 clicks because I'm in thinner air. You re-zero, slip the dial, put the lever back over, and it is locked on there and ready to go.
So it's complicated enough that it's not gonna come open in a rifle scabbard or
right.
in your backpack or something, but it's easy enough to change on the fly if you need to.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it can't accidentally open because you have to. This button is recessed.
It's recessed, so
nothing can get to it.
It's like
once
a
you
two-stage.
pop that, yep.
Very cool.
Safety lock. So that's one of the biggies, and then just really with that kind of mentality of I'm going to need to adjust things for each shot, making sure that all the controls are the way that you'd like them. Throw lever on the power selector so you can quickly zoom in and out, and then of course lens covers, integrated reticle level. I do like that. I don't use it all the time, but when you get in steep stuff and on a side,
how does that work? Is it lighted?
It is.
It's lit, so red dot on the left, right, red dot on the right. It's level, or is it?
So they're all illuminated, and our illumination is here on the side. And what we've done, rather than making it something that you need to, kind of interpret, if it's level, the light stays on. So if you've got a fire dot or an illuminated pattern, if it's level, it stays on lit all the time. If you cant it more than 1 degree left or right, it'll just flash. Enough that you can still shoot through it if you need to. There's nothing distracting or taking your eye away from the center where you need to be focused. But it will tell you if you're straight up and down. And that actually comes deactivated because not everybody wants that.
It.
Yeah.
That's really interesting because I found out I have a cant, a natural cant that was an accident, and I learned how to do it, or I learned how to shoot with it. But if somebody else gets my gun, they miss all the time because, that's just because they can't shoot the cant.
Yeah,
and
the way that you hold
it.
Yeah.
And so I had to train myself this summer because my kids are old enough to start hunting, and they're using my gun. Mm-hmm. And so I had to train myself how to get out of that cant, and that would have been helpful.
It's helpful. I have the same thing. So, I kind of grew up doing this. I do it my way. It works. And we've got a shooting academy where we train all sorts of people from all sorts of agencies and things. But that cadre will walk us through, and they'll look at it, and they don't care. They don't care if you've been shooting 20 years or 20 seconds. They'll look at it and make suggestions.
Yeah.
And they pointed something out to me, and I said, well, yeah, but it's... And they said, well, that's just because you naturally are canting the rifle.
To the left.
And we're going to take all of this and level it up, and you're going to get used to that sight picture, and you're going to like it a whole lot better when you start stretching the barrel a little bit. And
it's more comfortable.
Right. It is.
Enough.
It is. I just did what I thought was right, and then that became muscle memory.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. Anything else that you guys made? The version 1 was kick-ass, honestly.
Yeah.
and you guys adjusted it a little bit different to make, you don't have to walk around with a wrench and all that stuff. What about the range finding? Did you guys adjust that?
We're going through, so on the rangefinder, the big thing there, that's the RX 5000. And to me, for what we do and in big open spaces, the idea of being able to just drop a pin on whatever I'm ranging, that is critical for me. And so what I like about that is, if I'm hunting public ground, I can tell, if I'm looking 1.5 miles, 2 miles at some elk, I can then range those and find out, are they on public, are they on private? So it'll give me the land ownership through Onyx.
Okay, I was going to say, so it's through one of the mapping software. So it's Onyx. So you range something 1,800 yards away, it will pop on your cell phone a dot where that is on the map.
Yep. Yeah.
So that okay, I got to go across this canyon, or you get over there and it looks completely different, which always happens to
me every time.
That's a really cool technology. Is it a different subscription, or how hard is it to connect those two?
It's not a different subscription. So if you've already got one, great, and it'll go in seamlessly. If you don't, it does come with a trial. So there's a trial, and so you can see what it looks like, and is this of use to me? And there's other mapping things that we can use, Apple Maps, Google Maps, some of the others. But the big one, I think, for a lot of people is Onyx.
Yeah, that's definitely the one almost everybody uses.
Yeah.
I love Onyx. They've been around. They've been a partner of ours for a really long time. And they're constantly changing and making updates, and that's a really cool thing, especially stalking, but really recovery.
Yes.
If you're shooting something across a canyon and you get on the other side and you're like, I think this is where I was. We had a bull this year. We shot, one of our hunt winners shot it across the canyon, and we got on the other side. And of course, the oak brush is 10 feet tall over there.
Yep.
Bull elk, it doesn't look that tall. You get over there, and we got lost. We were actually on the wrong fold,
Yeah.
And that would have been super handy.
It helps a lot, because we know when the animals are out, right? So if it's the first half of the day, you've got plenty of daylight for locating and recovery. But if it was an evening shot,
in the dark,
now you've got an issue, just trying to figure that out. And so we do it a little bit differently in terms of making sure that it's really accurate. So you're going to be within about 25 yards per 1,000.
Okay.
So even if it's 3,000 yards away, you're talking a couple miles. By the time you get up there, if you pin it from here and it's 3 miles away and it drops a pin on your map, you'll be within 75-ish yards in the dark of that, and that's at more than a couple miles, right? So for normal shot distance, I can't picture us shooting 3,000 yards. That's more of a navigation thing, right?
Right.
So on a normal shot distance, you're going to be 10 yards or less. So just walk. You can walk blindly to where the pin is, and then go, oh.
So is it just with the handheld rangefinder, or is it the same technology in the rangefinding binos? Right
now, just in the handheld.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that allows you to kind of wayfind and locate. And it doesn't. One of the things that we hear is, man, is it every time I range, is it throwing a pin on my map? It's not. You get to choose when you want that, or if you mess up, like I tend to do, because once I get into kind of kill mode.
Seeing red.
Yep, it's time to go. It's go time. We're doing what we need to do, and then afterwards, I didn't pin that. Yeah, I could go back and range it again, but you can pick up the last one. So you can go back in there and go send that pin to my phone.
Oh, very cool.
And also helpful for if it doesn't go perfectly, or you shoot here and then it runs there, and the last place you saw it was running into the timber. You can pin that super quick and go, okay, that's where.
That was the kill site. This is where he ran into the timber,
right
over the hill or wherever.
Whatever it was. Last place I saw him.
Right.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
So pretty handy.
Yeah, that's very nice. So what's some of the things that you guys are coming out with that you can talk about in the near future that is exciting?
Sure. Yeah, again, talking about some of those small things. So, you try to get better every single day and just find out what are the things that kind of need to be improved. The first cars didn't have turn signals and headlights and all that, right? So when you look at spotting scopes, for example, so we've got an SX2 and an SX4. There are Alpine and our Pro Guide HD spotting scopes. One of the things that drove me nuts all the time is that little plate on the bottom, right? You take your tripod and you've got the plate, and you screw the plate to the bottom of the spotting scope, and you normally do that in your house where it's 70 degrees.
Right.
And then we go outside and it's 0.
Right.
Everything shrinks up, the plate is loose, and as you're trying to move, everything wiggles in the wind or turns.
Right.
Well, why not just make that foot the same dimensions as the tripod? So
I've always wondered that.
Yeah.
And you just said it, and with ARCA being such a huge thing now, everybody's tripods use it. I mean, it's become the gold standard of plates.
And you can slide your rifle into the tripod if it's got ARCA. You can slide the spotting scope in. So yeah, that foot that's on the bottom was really close to the right dimension anyway. So it's kind of like, well, why don't we just make it the exact dimension and throw the plate away?
Yeah.
So the plates are still included, but yeah, that helps. We've done other things like eye cups and improved the optics, some of those things. But when we're talking about these little things, that one drove me nuts. It always drove me crazy because you'd be out there glassing, everything would cool off, and then it would be loose, and I'm digging around looking for a Leatherman.
Yep, trying to tighten it up. Then you get it so tight, and you end up busting the screw or tripping it out or whatever.
Well, my wife always looked at me like I was crazy because I would take a new spotting scope and the plate and go throw it in the deep freeze in the garage.
And then do it.
And get everything shrunk up, and then I'd crank it down. But then if you ever had to take that plate off, you better throw it back in the freezer first or go outside.
That's right.
Go outside when it's cold.
So you talked about eye cups. Didn't you guys innovate a little bit on the lens covers for the spotting scopes? Isn't there something new there?
We did, yeah. So there's
Which is one of those things that drives me nuts. In fact, I'm to the point now I just throw them away because none of them work worth a shit.
You probably shouldn't say this as the guy that's including lens covers with them, but if they're waterproof and scratch resistant and everything, mine are the first ones to go.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, I know that people like to use them, so we do want to.
I like to store them with them.
Right. And so how do you make it so that if they're attached, especially in Wyoming, if they're attached now on a spotting scope, you've got a big-sized objective lens, and it's blowing and flapping in the wind and all that. So how do you look at this in a way that is field practical but also still good for storage? And so you can do that through neoprene cases or make them so that they attach in better.
Right.
They've always kind of been an afterthought, and they should be up in the forefront because it's the number one thing that people kind of complain about.
Right.
You've got this thing that does everything you want it to except for this thing. Well, guess which one sticks in my mind? Unless I cut it off with my knife and throw it away and then go there. Now I don't have to worry about it ever again.
Right.
Which is what ends up happening most of the time. So we've improved those just for better fit, better functionality in the field. And then on the eye cup itself, that's the part that you interact with the most, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's a binocular or a spotting scope, making sure that those are the right form. So if you want to block out some sun on the side, you can. So we've got interchangeable eye cups because everybody is different. If we grab the whole audience and say, here's 15 of them. Which one do you like best? We'll get 16 answers.
Right.
So we're trying to get the most common groups, put them in there, make them interchangeable, and we've had good success with that. A lot of people like that. They all find different ones that they want to put on there.
And I got to think that the reason that you guys, deal with these small, intricate things or changes is because you came from the customer service side. You heard the complaints. You heard the guys going, I hate my eye cups, or I keep losing the frickin' wrench or whatever.
Yep.
And that says a lot to the culture. It says a lot about your guys' company that, you're listening to suggestions and ideas from the customer through customer service because you're growing them up. You and John and others. I'm sure there's a ton of others that started that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's part of the culture. So I've been asked before, you've been there 20 years, what is the company. What I always say to that, what's so great about it is the company enables us to do the right thing. And they actually want us to actively go seek what is the right thing for the consumer.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's easy cliche to throw out there that, that we're here because of the customer, which is true. 100% we are. But if you don't take that to heart and say, how do I get this better every day for somebody? And you kind of have to take a step back and let your pride step to the side because we've created this thing and I'm super proud of it. And then I say, what do you not like about it? This, and this. And it's kind of a kick to the gut, right? If you look at it that way, it can be really tough to be in product. If you look at it as, I've got my ideas for the next generation, it really helps. It's just a perspective shift, but go seek the things. What annoys you on this? What do you not like? What would you like to see it do?
Different, yeah.
And keep track of those things. And sometimes having the 85 engineers will come up with stuff that we wouldn't have normally seen. So you talk, Henry Ford, he said, well, if I'd have asked the people, they'd have wanted to have faster horses.
Right.
So there's a little bit of both of those. How do we push the envelope with the engineering groups that really know every in and out? But also, how do you listen to the guy that's using this all day, every day on the little things like a stupid wrench? Right.
So let's talk a little bit about Leupold's history. I don't know how many people know where you guys came from, the history of it, that you are one of the last U.S. manufacturing in the optics world, that you're, Oregon-based, been there forever. You're generationally owned. It's not a publicly traded company. It's still family-owned. Let's talk about the history. How did it all start?
Yeah, so we were founded in 1907.
Wow.
And if you think about what was going on, westward expansion, some of that stuff, a lot of survey equipment. So water level measuring, forestry devices, so things like fire finders. So you go up in a big forest tower and there's a 3-dimensional map that has grids on it. And so you can look around and say the fire is out by that third bump. That's right here. Here's the grid section. Compasses, some of that stuff. And so we actually started on the East Coast with a couple of immigrants had come in and were working at a surveying and an instrument and equipment company.
Okay.
And decided, well, we can do this too. Came across with westward expansion, and that's where a lot of the need was now on the West Coast for people coming out, and landed in Portland, Oregon. And they set up the shop there, and it was Leupold and Volpel at the time, and it was instruments, like we said, compasses and other things. Well, with our coastal range of mountains, for those that are not familiar with Western Oregon, the ocean comes in. We have a smallish range of mountains. They're about 3,000 feet tall, but you're going from 0 to 3,000.
Right.
That's where the rain comes from, because you've got all that wet moisture coming in, pushing up those mountains. So it's always rainy. It's rainforest type of an environment. Well, he's hunting in that, and his scope fogged up. And Leupold had never even thought about rifle scopes, anything at this point, but his rifle scope fogged up. And he looked at that, and basically he's saying, we make instruments all day, every day. I can make a better scope than this. And it became a side project for him because his passion was being out and hunting and doing that stuff. And he says, yeah, we can make this better. And so that's where the first nitrogen-filled sealed scope that wouldn't fog on the inside came from. It cost him a pretty nice deer. And he's like, I'm going to fix this. And that passion, that nights and weekends and that side hustle became the business, became the lifeblood of the company in the 40s.
So it's the same thing. It's no different than what you guys are doing now. You're solving little problems.
Yeah.
He was solving a problem about a scope fogging up, and this year you guys are solving a problem where you don't have to pack around a wrench.
Yeah.
You're just constant improvement.
And you keep chipping away at it, the same way you climb a mountain, right?
Yeah.
Just one step at a time.
So is the rifle, is the hunting side of it, I know you guys have your hands in a lot of other businesses, but is the rifle, the hunting side of your business, the primary business, or is there other stuff that you're doing that you're bringing technology into either way?
Yeah. So we have a very robust kind of military government LE type of business as well. And so that generally what you see is we have the gold ring on our hunting type scopes and the black ring on our Mark series or our more tactical.
Okay.
And if you think back on that, having a kind of a shiny gold ring on the front of a scope that you're trying to keep hidden, that's where that diversion
not ideal
happened.
in Iraq when you're getting in a firefight.
Yeah. So they come back spray painted anyway, and changed and all that.
Yeah.
But on what I would call the black ring side of things, that's where we're really pushing the envelope in a lot of cases, whether it's drop tests, tracking, all the performance capability that you need to do long range precision work day in, day out in the harshest conditions, dropped out of helicopters, slammed in Humvee doors, blown up, things like that happen, and the scope just has to perform. And so you get this unique kind of crossover where there's a military type usage and a whole set of tests that you go through just to meet a mil standard. But then hunters do other things like drive around with it on an ATV, and that vibration is different. When it's just sitting there running, it tries to unscrew things.
Right.
Your mounts come loose or whatever it is. And so we merge all of those. So when you look at something like this, that might be a hunting scope, it's still going through the same tests if you needed to swim out of a torpedo tube with it.
Wow.
And when you look at the Mark series, some of the military testing does not account for some of the things that hunters do, like a horse rolling over it.
Right.
It's more sharp impact on hard surfaces. And so all of those things get compiled year after year after year. And, for me on the engineering side of it, when you go through and look at a 40-some page document that's all one-line specifications for tests, and if it has to be within this threshold and it has to survive this and do that, by the time it passes that test, man, I can sleep at night because I know it's going to perform in the field. The engineers hate that room, like that whole battery of tests. So it's like, man, it's made out of glass. You want us to do what?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, yeah, well, it's got to hold up.
Well, don't you guys have? When I was there, I did a tour. I don't know, 10 years ago probably, through Leupold, and you guys had. Do you guys call it the Punisher?
We do.
What is that? Explain that a little bit. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Eberly Stock. Eberly Stock is one of my favorite backpacks. Now, I've been wearing their backpack for almost 20 years. They have lightweight backpacks. They have modular backpacks, everything from their mainframe, which is just a frame pack that you can put bags on. They have these cool outside called bat wings that you can use. So check them out at eberlystock.com and make sure you tell them Ike sent you.
So it's got some folklore with it, but that comes from, it doesn't exist anywhere other than the White Sands missile base.
Oh, really?
It's a unique, custom-built piece of equipment, and essentially we've combined things from heart monitoring and surgery techniques, which allow us really optimal centration if you're trying to poke in through a hole somewhere in a body.
Right.
And then, so you can combine that with mounting systems and then essentially a huge jackhammer that shakes things really hard. What it does is once this is all set up and done, it will simulate recoil on any firearm. So we've got an underground shooting facility or a tunnel right there. We can go shoot any firearm, measure the exact recoil. I mean down to seeing the sear release and the recoil from the firing pin starting to move forward.
Oh,
the primer crushing, like total nerd stuff, right?
Yeah.
That I love. We can see the exact recoil trace and the duration of the recoil, which is actually bigger than the actual force in terms of getting it right. We can shoot something and then go replicate that in this room. So I don't have to sit down there, or someone doesn't have to sit down there and shoot it 10,000 times on a 6-pound 458 or 416 or a Scar Heavy or whatever it is. And so that Punisher replicates that, and it's an interesting piece of equipment because most of the time, we put ours in there and we have the test, so we kind of get to cheat because we have the test so we can build to the test. But a lot of the other things that we put on there are in pieces within the first 30, 40.
That was the funniest thing. There was one of your competitors. He goes, I'm going to show you. This is your competitor, one of our competitors. And I was like, oh my gosh, it just literally blew apart.
It's a pretty severe test.
Yeah. I go, what is that mimicking? And I think Bruce told me it was a 416 Rigby or something. It was a huge gun. We found, we
can do any of them, but kind of our baseline test is if you take a 375 Ackley, so maybe 375 Ruger, something like that, and you put it on a sub 6-pound gun.
Okay.
And then add 30% on top of it. That's the baseline recoil, whether you buy a scope for, $299 or any of them. That's the baseline test. That's where we start. And we're going to replicate that over 10,000 impacts.
And it's not just the scope, but you're testing the mounts, you're testing the screws, you're testing everything.
Well, what happens if it doesn't perform from the mount to the scope to you're going to assume that my scope's not holding zero. So all that has to be locked in. And so the mounting system actually is a very underrated component here because you've got a really good rifle, you put really good ammo in it, you put a really good scope on top of it, and then you just kind of picture, well, if I just duct tape it together, it'll be fine. Those have to hold perfectly because thousandths of an inch become minutes. So if you're off by 6 thousandths, so kind of a human hair, you'll be off 6 inches to a foot at 100 yards.
Oh my gosh.
And that's everything has to, you're not going to see something that's off is I guess my point there.
Yeah.
They have to work.
So it's all tested. Let's talk about the glass that you guys are using because your glass is unique to you, correct?
It is proprietary, yeah.
Which is it being manufactured in the U.S. or are you having to outsource it to?
We get it from a variety of places. There's not one local U.S. supplier that can get us the quantity that we need. That's what
I was thinking.
And so
it's not an easy manufacturer.
It's not, and so when you look globally, there's only a small handful, 4 or 5 sources globally.
Right.
But it's really more about what do you do with it. So people ask me about glass regularly, and probably the easiest way to kind of replicate that or walk back through it is a recipe. So you can tell me the ingredients that need to go into a good cake, But if you eat my cake, you're going to think that I did something wrong. I'm not a good baker. Pick your analogy. It's not
just because it has flour doesn't mean that you know how much flour.
Yeah, here's some flour. Go make me the best pizza you've ever had, right?
Right.
And so, it's really, what do you do with those ingredients, or how do you create the mixture the right way? And so when you look at a scope, we go through and look at every surface of every lens, and there may be 12 different lenses in there. But every lens has a different index of refraction. There's a whole, I could go hours and hours, and I won't because everybody will be asleep. But designing it, how do you design it? What exactly do you need from every single lens and then every coating on top of it? And knowing that as soon as the light hits the objective lens, you've just changed the properties of that on purpose, or you wouldn't have a scope. You're trying to make things bigger or whatever. But the front surface of the front lens changes the characteristics of the light. So now the back half needs to be accounted for and then coated appropriately.
So it's going
and then the
back
next
and
lens,
forth,
and then the
back
next
and forth.
As it comes through, you keep changing what it's doing. So you need to predict that path all the way through. And it's a whole art and a science. And it's really about what do you do with that design? How do you design every single lens in the prescription? And then a ton of mechanicals for it to hold up, right? But you can design in things like eye box and field curvature, and all of those things are all handled by somebody sitting down and saying, I need it to do these exact things, so I need these materials in this exact shape with these coatings.
And this is how it's going to affect everything else in making. So what would you say is you've been there 20 years, what is one of the most innovative things in the last 20 years in that you guys, because it seems to me like optics have changed significantly in 20 years. Not just the clarity, but the functionality and range finding. And I mean, what do you think is one of the pivotal moments in optic history?
Yeah, I think there's kind of a couple. So if you're talking optically, it's going to be the eye box, how forgiving the scope is behind it. So it is to your eye. So when you get behind the scope, we're not always at a range on a nice little bench where you can get comfortable, right? You're laying prone, you're sitting down, you're doing something.
Leaning against a tree. Yeah, you're never perfect.
Right. And if you think back to higher magnification is kind of what everybody's looking for now. If you go back 20, 25 years, a high magnification scope was hard to get behind. Your head had to be exactly in the right spot behind it to see through it. So from a usability standpoint, and the first thing that we interact with, consciously designing in a more forgiving eye box, a location where my eye can see clearly through the scope with a full sight picture, is harder than it sounds, and it can be done intentionally. But then the mechanics. So I kind of look at it in a couple ways. The mechanics have changed. It used to be I'm going to set it and forget it. So I just go get zeroed. I 0 1.5 inches high, 2 inches high, whatever it is.
I leave it at 6. I only leave it at 6 because I know how big that animal is at 6 power.
Yep.
I know the yardage.
How far he is, and I'm going to hold top of his back. Right? I need to hold, a third of a body over or whatever it is. Now we're dialing and adjusting for every single shot. The equipment has gotten better from across the board. You can shoot little bitty groups long ways away, and people are capitalizing on that more. Yeah. So they're wanting to exercise every aspect of it, and the mechanics to be able to dial for every shot sounds simple on paper because you're just moving something inside, and if it just goes up at the same angle, then every click it'll be the same. But you've got a lens in front of that that's curved. It wouldn't make things bigger if it wasn't curved. Well, when the erector system inside is looking straight through the middle of it, it's got a different view than as you come up and are looking through a curve. So think the curve on your windshield.
Yeah. It's like looking through the edge of the windshield versus the center.
Yeah.
Things are distorted.
Right. And so at some point, that erector system is in here moving, and there are lenses that are fixed. As it changes the angle between the next lens, you would naturally start seeing that those click values change if you don't do something about that. And so getting the clicks so that if I go up exactly, we'll call it 20 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever it is, or mils, having the clicks up at the top be exactly 10th mil or quarter MOA is not as simple as it was in the middle. One place or the other, optically, it's now looking through a curve and it's moving more or less.
Right.
So you need a lot of design goes into making sure that no matter where you are in the scope's adjustment travel inside, a click is a click. And a lot of that comes back from military stuff, from the requirements.
Is there a tip on how to zero it so that it makes it Is there a strategy to do that, to adjust it perfectly to start with?
For the user or for us?
For the user.
For the user, that's an us problem.
Okay.
We go through.
So no matter where
we do that, and so the idea being that you can just count on it. You shouldn't need to know and even think about that. You should be able to just go out and when I turn this thing and I go 4 clicks, it goes up exactly, 1 minute. Ideally, so depending which age of a scope or brand, whatever it is. So if you want to just talk the ideal state, keeping it as centered as possible when you're zeroing does help. And so there's a couple ways to do that. You can just turn the adjustments all the way to one side, all the way back, and come back halfway. Or a little known trick is if you just take and turn the power down. But if this was a mirror in my bathroom or wherever, put a mirror over it. When you look through, you'll be able to see 2 images of your crosshair.
Oh, yeah.
And then just turn your knobs
to where they align.
To where they're on top of each other. You're seeing the reticle itself back here, and then you're seeing a reflection of where the erector is moved. So if you start centered and then make adjustments with your mounts so that to get rough zeroed, rather than, okay, I've got I need to turn it 3 whole turns to the left to get sighted in. If you can do that with your mount, so that you start in the middle. Now you're kind of staying around the center of that curvature on the lens. But really, that's an us problem. We should make, and we do. We make sure that it just works anywhere. But that's
so. How significant is that? I mean, obviously it's perfect if you do it that way. But how significant is it? Is it something guys should be doing?
I wouldn't go back if they haven't had any issues so far. And you can dial up and you've got plenty of movement on the scope. So as I'm dialing up, I don't need to go farther and it just stops, right? If it just stops, the erector system, which is the tube on the inside that moves around, has hit the main tube. That's why it's stopping. It hit it, and it can't go any farther. Once it hits, you've basically taken the suspension out of the scope. So it's like loading your pickup up with 2 tons of hay and then driving a washboard rug.
Right.
It's a recipe for breaking something.
Right.
So if you're not running out of travel, you should be fine. If you are running out of travel, call us. Probably the easiest way is call us at 1-800-Leupold and just say, this is what I'm up against. What do I need? We can do things with tapered mounts. We can do things with windage adjustable mounts. But I would start with a centered scope, and then I try to get it as zeroed as perfectly as I can
with the mount
before I touch any of these.
Okay.
Honestly, rifles have come a long way. A lot of people are using cross-slot style that are not adjustable. And with the computer controls that are happening on the manufacturing of the rifle, the mounts, the barrel, all the rest, the idea of setting a scope on there and then needing to crank it 5 full turns to get zeroed, that doesn't really happen anymore.
It's funny. I was talking to the guys at Hornady, and we were talking about, the same thing. I said, what's the biggest significant thing that's changed in ammunition? And he said, CAD. He said, when we started being able to put stuff in, it's perfect every single time.
Yeah.
Just like your mounts are perfect. Every mount is the exact same. Every rifle is the exact same. It's changed and made everything more accurate.
Yeah.
So that's the same thing here.
It's almost like a tolerance stack with your full kit, right?
Yeah.
So when the action is more true to the barrel, the holes are more true to the action, the mounts are more true to the action in the scope. When all those start lining up, you're not dealing with something that's way off to a side, and now that the scope, let's say, is all the way over to the side, and every time you shoot, it's kind of clinking off of the main tube. Well, that can make your ammo look like it doesn't shoot.
Right. Yeah.
If you're right on the edge of your travel, so getting those things all kind of back in the middle, they all perform better.
Yeah.
Right. And so everything has an opportunity to excel. So I would agree with that.
That's really interesting. So, Hunt Expo, have you seen anything? I know it's the first day, so there's probably you haven't had a lot of time to walk around, but have you seen anything crazy, anything that I should go check out?
I haven't yet. I kind of came straight here. They were letting us in ahead of the crowd, so I haven't seen much, but I'm gonna go look.
Yeah, this is a fun show. It's one of my favorites because this is where, if you're a Western hunting guy, this is where you find the unique little whatever it is.
Yeah.
If it's a rifle scope or a a unique little trinket. So I can't wait to get around, walk around. I appreciate you coming. Appreciate your time, and obviously appreciate your guys' support for the podcast, which is awesome, and keeping this content going. Couple questions, final questions. One of the things that I'm always interested, because there's never a perfect answer to this, is why people hunt. What is attracting, what attracts you to hunting? What attracts Tim Lesser to hunting? And obviously, you killed a hell of a bull. Is that Colorado?
That's a Utah bull.
Is it?
Yeah.
That is way cool. Was that this year?
2 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And man, I'm going to be tough pressed to beat that one. still kind of on cloud 9 over that.
Good adventure then.
It was great. Yeah. Everything on the hunt. It's nice to have a nice bull at the end of it. It was a great, icing on the cake, or however you want to phrase that. But it was, if you could have put everything together perfectly, the location, the amount of effort to get in there. So it was back in a pocket that's hard to get to, real hard to get to. And then we got in there and got to watch elk being elk. Had no idea we were in there. They never really get disturbed, so they weren't sketchy.
Right.
It was like watching true, just completely wild elk do their thing. And it all just it came together where we're watching this group down here at a water hole, and there's one up in the timber just acting like a big old bull.
Could you see him or just hear him?
Could just hear him, and he didn't want to come out, and he's doing all the things, right? And just won't come out. Everybody else has been out, and it's like, well, if I couldn't hear him, he's up there glunking, and if we didn't hear him, I would have thought we'd seen everything.
Right.
And it's like, let's just wait and see what happens. There's a couple good bulls down here, but it's more about that experience. This is an awesome spot.
Right. We made it all the way in here. We might as well wait it out
and see what I got to see. There's one more in there, and I got to see what it is. And then right kind of at last light, the traditional, you see it just kind of, these cows kind of get shoved out, and they didn't really want to. And there's 3 cows come out, and they're looking back, and it's like, oh man, this is coming together. He's going to be coming out. And he popped out and got behind some brush. I never really got a look at his head, but we were going by age where we were hunting, and so you could see the height of the pedicle, you could see kind of the Roman nose, you could figure out he was old, but just because his nose was sticking out. So I only saw the brow tines and everything, and we kind of made the call. I was like, I don't know if he's broken, any of that, but this hunt has been awesome, and so he looks old enough to, if he comes out, I'm gonna shoot, and. We never got a look at him really until we got up there. As far as now, I'm focused on shoulder, right? And the way it all worked out, he stepped out, I shot, he went behind some brush and had put in one more, and down he went. We couldn't see.
So you didn't really know what he was
until we walked up, and then I looked. We had to walk uphill, and he was in a little bit of a hollow, a low spot. Had no idea until I was from me to you away. I knew he was old enough, and you could tell by diameter of main beam. He's a mature bull,
right? And
the experience was just so cool. It was like, this is where I want it to come together. This is going to be awesome. And then we looked over the top, and it was. I've had plenty of experiences where they shrink when they hit the ground. This one grew when I looked over, and so it was. I couldn't have put together a better elk hunt. Yeah, it was
awesome.
Great.
That's one of the fun things is when you're trusting. You're like, I'm just after a mature bull. I don't care. He might be broke off, and if he is, I'll deal with that.
Yeah.
And it came together. That is way cool.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. So why do you hunt? What's attracting about it?
There's a lot of little things, so knowing where my food comes from, that type of thing, but I don't think that's really what you're at. You're asking, like, what is it?
Yeah.
And I wish I could put it into words. I started out with my dad going, and it just feels different. I spend a lot of time in the woods. I do a lot of times just out kind of hiking, scouting, something else. When there's a tag in your pocket and a rifle or a bow in your hand, you're just more in tune with everything. I just notice things that I wouldn't notice before, and I don't know what it is. Is it a dopamine rush? I don't know. I know that I just feel better when I'm out there doing that, and I associate it with my parents and with family and friends, and I like having the food that I know, all of those things. But selfishly, I love the way it makes me feel.
Yeah,
whether I get something or not.
That's I've never had anybody say that, but you're 100% right. It's something you can't explain, but it's important, and it's important, but you don't know why.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Huh, that's really cool.
I just feel different on a hunt.
So one of the other questions that we talk about a lot. We've talked a lot about your life. We've talked a lot about Leupold. You're obviously a family guy. I know that. We talked about kids. It's college, which one of them's going to the devil's side in Colorado for all those CSU fans.
Yeah.
Us
I think she did it just to
that.
twist the knife.
So do you go down to the bronze boot? For those that don't know, there's a rivalry between Colorado State University and University of Wyoming, and they play football, and they have a bronze boot, and they pass it back and forth, whoever wins.
Well, so she made it all the way through undergrad with a big donut. Wyoming beat them every single time.
Josh Allen days, probably.
It was just Colorado State won this last year, but the previous 3 in a row, because she got done kind of fast, Wyoming beat them each time.
Yep.
Laramie, Colorado, Fort Collins, and then back in Laramie, and that was great for me. This year they won, and I caught some crap over that. It was well deserved, though. I'd been giving it out for 3 years. So yeah, we do the bronze boot thing, and it's a big deal in those towns, right?
Yep.
It's
fun.
It's a
and those
rivalry
colleges
for sure.
are what, an hour apart?
Like 45 miles, something
we used
like
to
that.
go down there
Yep.
So, what's one of the things that you're going to be thinking about on a deathbed, if you, God willing, you have the opportunity? What are some of the things that are going to be important in Tim Lesser's life?
I've thought a little bit about that, and to me, what I think, it's hard to say. I haven't been through that, but it is the moments, and hunting's a big part of it that you share, where you're just focused on being together. There's not the noise of a Super Bowl in the background, or a game, or you're playing this or that. There's something about being in a hunting camp, even if it's back at the tent or in a hotel room or whatever it is. You're kind of all connected and bonded there. And what I've found is when I get time to reflect, when something tough comes up or whatever it is, those are the memories that I go back to. And some of them are, me with parents. So some of them are when I was the kid, and some of them are when I was the adult. And hopefully I get to keep making those for a long time. But those, when it comes down to it, almost all of the important things involved family. Summer vacations, summer fishing. The vast majority are in a hunt camp somewhere where you just kind of disconnect. You're there to be together and experience the thing, and they just hit different. And so
it's a connection. I agree 100%. It's a connection that you can't do. It's really hard to duplicate in any other scenario.
Yeah.
During a hunting, and I tell my daughter, not joking, but her boyfriend, if she gets one, is going to have to go hunting with me. And because in a hunting scenario, you get to see them mad, you get to see them frustrated, you get to see them happy, you get to see them, struggling in every one of the emotional arrays. And I think it's really important, and it's a connection that you can't get other ways.
You just don't, right? It sounds crazy to those that don't hunt, but I mean, just even this last Thanksgiving, my daughter harvested a great bull. She shot a great bull in Colorado, but everybody was frozen, and we're lighting fires, and because it's blowing snow sideways, and we don't want to go back because you get little patches where you can see, and then there's the hardship of getting in and out of there, and then there was the jumping up and down and the tears when it came together on Thanksgiving morning,
right? And
then there's calling friends, and they come in and help us do the pack out, and it's just I don't know how to put all that together, but that's what runs through my head. Yeah, the highs, the lows, all of it are good. They're all good.
Yeah, that's amazing, and you're right. That's what I hope we all think about when we're on our deathbed. Because no one ever said, "God, I wish I would have worked more."
No, that doesn't seem to be a common theme.
So you're a man of knowledge. You called yourself a nerd, which this will be an interesting question. If you had the opportunity to do a TED Talk, what would you do it on?
Oh man,
or have you ever done one?
No, I've never done one. And in this vein of what we're talking about, this is going to be the dumb. My family's going to be so let down. Like you had this wide open. You could have said anything, and you chose that. This is really dumb. So maybe I need to think about it. But properly mounting. This is something that drives me up the wall because it can be simple and it can be so impactful. How to properly mount rifle scopes on rifles can change your life. It can just, if you get it on there wrong, you're going to fight it forever and ever and ever and never quite get it right. And if you get it on there the right way, everything just kind of works, and it just keeps working forever. And there's such subtle difference between the two that if we could just walk through and spend a full hour on what matters and what doesn't. Do I need to lap rings? Do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? And just show somebody, here's the inside of the scope. All you're trying to do is point the outside of it where the barrel's pointed, and then keep the middle portion centered. Screw these things down. It can be very, very simple, but it is probably the number one phone call that we get needs to be resolved with some kind of a mounting system. The front one's on the back, and now the scope's sitting up, at an angle. So on the hunting vein and on what we're talking about here, if we could go through that, that's probably what I would pick.
So give us 3 tips on how to properly mount a rifle scope.
Okay.
Or 5 or however many you have.
Yeah, the biggest ones are really to start with your scope centered. So if you buy a new one, you're good. But start with it centered, because that's going to tell you, like we talked about with the mirror or with the adjustments.
So if you're taking a scope from one rifle to another, go center it with the mirror.
Start with it centered and get it centered with the mirror, the adjustments, because now when you drop it onto, so everything else is on there. You've already got the rifle with the bases on it, and the rings are in the base and all that. You will know so much right away by putting that scope in there with it centered and then attaching the ring tops. A bore sighter, I don't know where you live, just somewhere you can look. For me, I can set the gun up and look out a window and not freak anybody out. But just check your bore sight. And if you look down the bore or use a bore sight of some sort and the scope is way off, something isn't right.
Right.
And yes, you've got adjustments there that you can start cranking it back over. But what I would say is if you have to turn it more than one turn in any direction, so more than one turn in the up, one turn in the down, or left or right, stop and take a breath there, and let's think about maybe the front bases on the back or vice versa. If you're shooting tapered bases for long range stuff, that's expected. But if you're off, but if you have to turn it more than one whole turn, let's figure out what's going on here. It'll still probably be fine, but if we can just get you started in the center, now you can dial up and down all that you want. The scope's going to last longer. You've got plenty of suspension, is what I call it, in there, for it to move around for drops and bangs and recoil and everything else. That's probably the biggest one, is just start with it centered, and if you have to turn more than a turn, call us.
What's the standard for eye relief? What are you looking for? Eye relief is the distance between the scope and your eye when you're on the rifle.
Yeah.
What's the standard there?
What I do, and I try to remember that a lot of times you're mounting it in where it's warm, and you're wearing stuff like we have now, and then you're going to throw a jacket on. So I'll throw a typical hunting coat on while I do this, but turn the scope to the highest power, and then I push it all the way forward, shoulder the rifle with my eyes closed so that I know I'm not trying to find otherwise you naturally try to go find the scope. Right. So I shoulder it comfortably with my eyes closed, and then I just open them and have somebody start sliding the scope back. And as soon as I get a full sight picture wearing my thick jacket on high power, I'm done. It. The eye relief will get a little longer as you turn the power down.
I've done something similar, but I've never thought about putting it on highest power, because that's narrowing your sight picture.
It's more sensitive on high power. So if you do it on high and get it right, even if you're adjusting a cheek piece or something to get, if you've got an adjustable comb, everything's more sensitive on high. So if you set it on high, then on low you're golden. But if you set it on low, you may be on the edge of low, and now when you turn it up, you're craning your neck or moving. So that's what I would recommend.
Okay, so one of the last things I'm going to ask, because I've never had somebody that was passionate about this. So, and I did this on a scope one time. Is I cranked I actually bent the tube, partially because it was cold, and or it was warm, anyway, I bent the tube by mounting it. How tight do you get the rings on that scope?
Yeah, so here's they need to be 28 inch-pounds, and everybody says, so what? What does that mean?
I don't have that measurement.
I don't have that. There are things you can get, torque wrenches and the others. The way I would relay that is most of the mounts come with a wrench in there, and it's got a little short end and a long end. And the long end is roughly an inch long by the time you actually get your fingers on it.
Yep.
If you're pushing hard enough to lift a 30-pound plate, that's all the tighter those need to go. You want them to clamp down enough so the scope isn't going to slide, but realistically going tighter than that, you're stretching the screw and you're actually weakening it. So when you go past that, you're actually taking and reducing the durability of the screw. You're thinking tighter's better. By the time you get all those tightened down, and just picture a 25-pound plate from the weights, or push on a bathroom scale to get 25 pounds, 30 pounds, and that's about how hard you should push on the longer end of that wrench. That will hold it. and you'll probably notice it if you ever just barely get each of the screws in and then you try to twist the scope or move it, it just jammed up.
Right.
They grip really well. And so that's what we would recommend.
And then making sure that the space between the rings on both sides is equal so that your ring's not canted one way or another.
Yeah, and the biggest thing, so what he's talking about is the kind of the ears, right? The ring bottom is down here, the scope goes in, and then the top, those ears right there. The main reason for keeping those separate or keeping the spacing equal so that you don't just crank down one side and then the other is that if you get the scope in there and you get the reticle straight up and down and then you just tighten down one side, it pulls it'll actually pull it over.
Okay.
And so yes, torque, just like lug nuts or anything else, you want to kind of bounce around. That does matter. But also, if you're paying attention to that, you won't have the reticle pulled you get all the way done, and you're like, well, now it's crooked. It was straight before. So, yeah, we kind of just use like a torque pattern. You start here and go down halfway, and then go opposite corner, go down halfway, and work your way around. And hopefully that then you do keep those even. That will be a good indicator of whether your reticle tried to...
Do you use Loctite on all the mounting?
I do not.
Okay.
So with ours, they come with a patch on them, so there's already some Loctite on their thread locker. It's not a bad idea, especially for kind of the Western ranch. If they're going to be on ATVs, snow machines, those things, the vibration, it's not more the recoil, it's the vibration of just sitting there the whole time. That has a tendency to just unscrew things.
Okay.
And so that's where it would really matter. But
flying with them. I flew to Africa this year and didn't Loctite the plate onto the rifle. Everything else was Loctited. Never even occurred to me because the plate came from the manufacturer. It was never Loctited. Got over there and I could not group. And just for happenstance, I reached over and grabbed the gun by the scope and it moved. I went, oh crap.
Yeah.
And of course, now I'm in Africa. I got no Loctite. I super glued them. I'll never get those out.
They're in there for. Yeah. They have this thing called JB Weld.
Yeah, exactly. That's all they had. So anyway, that's those are really helpful hints, and I appreciate it. Thank you for coming on. And,
thanks for having me.
Thanks for the sponsorship and the partnership is always great. I love you guys. As much crap as I give you, and back and forth.
We love it.
Yeah, it's very cool.
That's the fun part.
I appreciate it. The gold ring is a standard for sure. My first scope was a gold ring, actually. It's in my museum.
Well, great.
Yeah, my grandfather gave it to me.
My first one as well. I've kind of grown up with the brand. Yeah, never let me down.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you guys want to check out, call them at 1-800-Leupold or Leupold.com. Check out the new VX6 version 2.
Yeah,
V2.
Gen 2.
Yep, Gen 2. And, of course, the new rangefinder with that cool integration into Onyx. And appreciate you listening today. And thanks. We'll see you next time.